Hello from Sydney lockdown. I'm about to go to bed, so anything I say right now will probably be out of date by the time I get up and, you know, manage to get it online. But that's okay, we'll deal with it. So, a few things. For coronavirus information or like interesting things about coronavirus in Australia, I highly recommend CoronaCast by Dr. Norman Swan. It's an ABC podcast, and yeah, some very interesting stuff. They seem pretty on top of a lot of the latest, things. They're not bound by any government, image managing or whatever. They just say whatever they want. They'll be critical of the government if they think so. They occasionally explore things overseas. They've got a very balanced medical opinion, and yeah, it's really interesting listen. Another thing, I've been a bit of a press conference junkie. I don't watch every single one, but I watch probably more than the average person, and I think they're entertaining. In a way, in like a weird way, in a like I'm getting old kind of way. I've also been watching way too much ABC 24, so I'm getting old, guys. But yeah, no, the press conferences. It's interesting to watch them like live because then you get exactly what the politicians said and not the media edited view. And yeah, my favorite thing in those press conferences, apart from the weird deer story, which you can look up, yeah, the naked sunbathing dudes who got startled by a deer and ran into the bush and had to be rescued by SES and got fined for breaching lockdown restrictions. Watch the sign language interpreters, the Auslan interpreters, because that's a lot of fun. Anyway, so I've been watching those press conferences, and apart from weird stories like that, my favorite thing is when a reporter asks a dumb question and the politician or health expert or whoever slaps them down because the media is just so dumb and they ask the same repetitive questions and they always want to get like some kind of drama, and it's just like, come on, guys. You're complaining about how things are being handled, and then you go and create more problems. You're part of the problem that you're complaining about. Like, ah. Anyway, so you can see I'm doing great. Anyway, so last video, I was talking about psychiatry, telehealth, and I don't want to do it. And at the time, cases were not that bad in Sydney. I still don't want to do telehealth, but things have taken off here. And the reason I tell you that I listen to CoronaCast and I watch way too much ABC 24 and the press conferences is I may reference things that you don't necessarily know about. And I'm sorry to international viewers who don't necessarily know the situation in Australia, because if I try and explain every single thing, this will be a 3-hour video and I'll be going to bed at 2 in the morning. So, what's happened? When I made that video, things were tracking along pretty well, and in New South Wales, when things are relatively low, we just contact trace the shit out of it, and most of the time things get handled. The only time that really didn't work is when it went to the Northern Beaches, because when they found out about that, it had already been at a super spreader event, and they had basically no choice but to lock down that part of Sydney. But the good thing about that part of Sydney is it's this weird little geographically isolated part of Sydney where there's only a handful of ways in and out, and also the community there are very like, they keep to themselves. They don't want people from the rest of Sydney invading their space, and I really think that that part of Sydney could use a train line. They've been planning, it's been on like plans from 100 years ago, but they never do it. Partly because like that part of Sydney always votes Liberal, and so Labor can't be bothered to deal with them, and the Liberals think it's too safe, although there are some things that are getting shaky these days. So nothing ever happens. But they could really use a train line because a lot of them commute to the city and there's a lot of bottlenecks and a lot of traffic. But no, if they had a train line, it'd make it really easy for the rest of Sydney to go there and invade their beaches, and they don't want that. They want to have their own little space. So when they got cases, very easy to shut that part of Sydney down. Anyway, apart from that, New South Wales has been very good at, like, if there's one case, we don't freak out, we don't lock down, like, Queensland or whoever. We just deal with it. We contact trace the shit out of it, and it goes away. Sometimes it takes a bit longer, but we don't have to inconvenience everyone in the state to do that. One thing I think is that our health system and our contact tracing system seem to be stronger than other states, and we have more confidence in it, whereas Queensland, I suspect, don't have the best system. I'm sorry if I'm talking weirdly, I'm just trying to get through all this. Um, I'm not trying to be like a dick, it's just. I don't know, I'm in one of those modes. I can't help it. But I do think that Queensland, the leaders, are not confident in their system, and that's why when anyone sneezes, they go into a 3-day lockdown and like, mess up everyone's plans. And if anyone in any other state, sneezes, they shut the border. There's a few other states that shut borders like that, like Western Australia, but they don't really want to be part of Australia anyway, apparently. I didn't know this until this whole thing happened, so yeah, the weird little things that you learn over time. Anyway, and then with health system stuff. So, one thing I learned last year is that Victoria's health system is quite different to New South Wales' health system and some of the other health systems. And I don't know how much that played into the problems they had last year. I mean, there are some people who claim it's luck, but they have had an unusually high number of, problems with coronavirus in Victoria. So, is it really luck, or are people just trying to be nice? And it does seem like the medical system was not equipped, at least at the start of the pandemic, to deal with things. I think their contact tracing's gotten a lot better. Hopefully the health system's gotten a little bit better. Yeah, something to do with the way things are centralized and decentralized between, the way different states do things. Let's not go into that anyway. Anyway, so, we've had these small little cases, and last video, when I was complaining about all that stuff, taking me a few minutes to get back to the point, yeah, things were just looking like one of those normal outbreaks that we've had. But this is the Delta strain, and I think, yeah, this is like we were the first state in Australia to really have proper Delta things going on. And the problem is, as soon as they contact trace, they are finding the links, but by the time they've found them and isolated people, they've already spread it to the next lot, and then they've got to contact trace that, so they're constantly playing catch up. And there was a point in these graphs where instead of going along like this, it started to go exponential, not just going up, but exponential. And that's when you get a real problem, and that's when they decided to lock down. And since the lockdown, it hasn't flattened, but it has gone on a gentler kind of slope. So, cross fingers, but it's Delta, and things are like, apart from how fast it spreads, it's very easy to catch. Like, there's this fleeting transmission, they're calling it, and I think it's something to do with the spike protein being a bit stickier, so when it gets into you, you don't need as much to get sick because it's with the spike protein being stickier, it's easier for them to actually attach. So with the regular COVID, some of them wouldn't quite be so successful. But in this one, a higher percentage of the little viruses are being successful and infecting people. That's what I understand from my late night trying to explain things, so I don't get too crazy like that, pointing to my charts and whatever. Anyway, so yeah, things have gotten a little bit crazier in Sydney since my last ramble, and it happened very quickly. And oh yeah, so I actually was expecting more cases. When they lock down, one thing they're doing in New South Wales is 8 p.m. is the cutoff for cases that have been reported, and then the next day they'll say, oh, we had this many cases to 8 p.m. But because we've got an outbreak at the moment, I think in the interests of transparency, they were trying to be very open and say, okay, this is what we had to 8 p.m., but overnight we've also had these cases. But as that's gone on and we've had more and more cases, it started to get confusing, and so I understand they stopped doing after 8 p.m. They only reported up to 8 p.m. But the timing of that happened to be when they were announcing lockdowns, and I sort of was a bit suspicious about that. I'm like, are they trying to hide some huge jump in cases so that we don't freak out? Just the timing seemed a bit sus. But the next day it was actually lower, so I think it was just them wanting to be clear and not confuse people, because Dr. Norman Swan did tweet, this is getting confusing, and then, what do you know, they made it less confusing. So, my paranoia, not warranted here. Yeah, but okay, so with the lockdowns, initially what they tried to do was what Victoria did last year, which we already know is not successful. They tried to take a few arbitrary suburbs and lock them down. Now, the northern beaches, geographically isolated, and they like to keep to themselves, so it's very easy to lock down that part of Sydney. But this time they tried to lock down the CBD and the eastern suburbs, which don't have clear geographical borders. And also, instead of just locking down the residents, they decided to lock down anyone who works there. And so my dad works in the city, which means he was locked down but we weren't, even though we live with him. Bit weird. And then in Newtown, there's this street. I go to Newtown. I know this area, and one side of the street was in lockdown, and the other side wasn't. And they tried that in Victoria. Doesn't work. Fortunately, I think the government realized that's not a great idea because, I mean, by then we already knew, like the day they announced that lockdown, there were already contacts who'd been to all these different exposure sites outside that area. So cat's already out of the bag. And so, yeah, the next day they're like, actually, we'll just lock down the whole of Sydney, which I think is sensible. And I think it has helped. But yeah, because it's Delta and it's spreading so fast and we don't have high vaccination rates at the moment, we'll see if 2 weeks is enough. I was actually surprised 2 weeks. I mean, I was complaining. I was like, you can't just lock down the eastern suburbs. You got to go for all of it. And they did it, but I was expecting like a week. They've gone for a proper 2 week lockdown instead of one of the half-assed, 3 to 7 days that the other states have previously done. So yeah, I was actually impressed with them going that far. Now, there's a lot of talk, is lockdown necessary, blah, 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 blah. I think in this case probably is, from all the things that I've been listening to, particularly CoronaCast, and yeah, things do seem a bit more serious. Like, New South Wales has criticised other states for doing, these flimsy little lockdowns, but in this case, like, instead of going for the pride, that we don't lock down very much. Instead of having that pride, the leaders have actually gone, no, we actually need this, and I think they've made a good medical assessment on that. Keep in mind, I'm no medical person. I'm just a nerd with too much time on my hands, watching too much ABC 24 and press conferences. Oh, I'm so sad. Anyway, so yeah, that's sort of the situation that we're in at the moment. It looks like it's going okay, but there are cases popping up in like health settings, and that's what you really don't want. Although people in aged care, more of them are vaccinated, so cross fingers that things don't get too out of control there. One of the major super spreading events that we had was a party, and like everyone who wasn't vaccinated seems to have been infected. Pretty much. I mean, there's some discrepancy about how many people were actually there, but it seems like the people who were fully vaccinated, they're the only ones who didn't catch it. And like having a vaccine doesn't necessarily mean you won't catch it. It's usually just that you'll have it less worse. You won't end up in hospital. And, that's why we're panicking about coronavirus around the world, right? Because of the hospital component and its capacity to overwhelm hospitals. If it was just a cold people caught, we wouldn't care. Vaccines, we're trying to make them into the cold, and then we can just treat it like the flu and get a flu booster every year or a COVID booster every year or whatever. Yeah, so things like that. I've been fully vaccinated, so, my younger brother, for those who don't know, he's got disabilities. We've been very concerned about what if he got COVID and ended up in hospital, and then you're not allowed to visit because it's COVID, and he wouldn't understand. He'd have to be sedated, and it's just like, we've been through things like that in the past. It's just so yeah, I didn't know that we qualified as carers, but yeah, so me and my two brothers, we've all been vaccinated, had both shots of Pfizer. So yeah, and that was good. They in our second time around, we ended up in the priority group, which when Gladys announced the priority queue thing, we thought it was just for little old ladies, with their little walkers. But no, we rocked up with Mikey in his wheelchair, and they're like, yep. And they were really good. They really took care of us. And as we were leaving, they're like, oh my God, you're such an amazing family and all this, which is always. I don't see it that way. This is just my life. It's been my life for almost as long as I can remember. But I guess I can understand, because most families who have a disability in the family, they don't stick together. And then when you have siblings, often the siblings will want to leave home as soon as they can to get out of the situation, whereas we've all stayed. So I guess that's a bit unusual, and maybe they're looking at that. I think also because mum came every time, because dad's working, they might have thought that mum was a single mum looking after a disabled kid. I don't know what they think. I mean, they weren't even sure that me and Dave were brother and sister because we look different. There's so much funny stuff with that. But yeah, no, it was really good. I'm getting sidetracked here. What am I even talking about in this video? I don't know. With Pfizer, right, I've heard Americans saying that your second Pfizer dose is when you're going to get all the bad side effects and, it knocks you over and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, Either I'm one of the lucky ones, or Americans are wimps, or maybe a bit of both. I don't know, because I was had this on Tuesday. I'm filming this on Thursday. Yesterday I did have like these weird, like the mild kind of off sick feeling, but nothing as bad as what they were, what I'd heard. This is from Hank Green's SciShow, and people commenting around that saying, "Yeah, I had that too." And I'm like, "Yeah, no, it wasn't that bad." I did have like some Panadol and Nurofen because that's what they said to do. Um, but yeah, I don't know if I really needed it. Yeah, and but I was going to be lazy anyway. One thing about lockdown is it's worked out really well for me because I wasn't going to work this week anyway, because I thought I was going to get Pfizer number 2 side effects and I didn't. So, but I was a little bit off, so it's probably good that I didn't go to work. Yeah, anyway, so fully vaccinated, don't have to worry. One thing, I'm glad to have just gotten it over with, so now I don't have to think about it until whenever they say we need to get boosters if some other variants come out, which they inevitably will. But we'll see how bad they are when they do. Yeah. But so with lockdown, right? One of the problems for me with lockdown, like it doesn't affect my life generally, and actually, like traffic is amazing. When we were going to get that second shot, it's school holiday traffic, but it's also pandemic lockdown traffic, and we got there so early because we just didn't think it would be so empty. Around our house, there seemed to be more cars, but when we actually got there, like as we were driving along, the streets just emptied out and traffic was so fast. Like, I don't hate lockdown traffic, it's amazing. Um, yeah, but so for the most part, lockdown doesn't affect me because I'm an introvert except when I'm on stage, if that makes sense. I guess I'm all about contradictions, and um, yeah, for the most part, it doesn't affect me. But one thing that does affect me is that because everyone's staying home, there's a lot more people on the internet, and there's a lot more people on social media, and there's a lot of them giving their opinion and their politics, and a lot of them aren't nerds like me, so I don't know where they're getting some of their information, but it frustrates the hell out of me, and so I've been trying to do less social media. It's very hard for me because like I don't even know how to find the fun stuff on the internet anymore. Like when I was younger and find like all that stuff about vampires. Where did I even come across that? Just from looking up stuff. I used to print off Wikipedia pages and take them on holiday with the family so I had something to read. I am that level of nerd. Anyway, so yeah, there's a lot of people posting their political opinions. I mean, they have been the whole pandemic, but I'm just like, I can't do it. And a few days back, I missed a few doses of the pill. I was almost gonna make a video just about that, but then lockdown happened, and I can put a card in whichever corner it is to when that happened last time. But last time when I talked about that, it was more about when I was catching up on my doses of the pill because I desperately don't want to have a period. Like it's just not a good part of my life. Like maybe I have some other problems that are just being masked by my use of the pill. I don't know, but I just know I don't want one. So I was trying to catch up with the pill and had a little bit probably didn't manage it very well, so I had a sudden spike in it, and the hormone balance like sort of made me a bit slow. I think I haven't watched it back. I don't remember exactly what it happened, so just watch that video for whatever happened. This time though, when I realized that I'd missed those doses, I realized that affected my behavior and my thinking a little bit. Mostly my behavior though, because I was still thinking the same shit. I was just dealing with it differently. So yeah, mainly my behavior. I realized, oh, for the last 2 days, I've been a bit more aggro and a bit less passive and a bit less willing to put up with bullshit. And so, yeah, this is sort of timed towards the beginning of lockdown, I suppose, while I'm thinking, gee, I really need to get off social media or just like cut back in some way. And yeah, I guess with the extra testosterone in my system, the extra, what do you call them? Are they androgens or I don't know. I think it's androgens. The pill that I'm on, the contraceptive pill I'm on, I mean, I'm on it for period pain, but it's one in Australia that's a bit restricted because of blood clotting. Um, you can technically only prescribe it for acne, which I had problems with. And so it's an anti-androgenic form of the pill. There's two different versions. One has androgens, one is anti-androgens, and mine's the anti-androgens, which means when I take it, it reduces things like testosterone in my system. So when I don't take it, the testosterone goes up. And yeah, I did get a little bit aggro. It's very interesting stuff. How small things like that. I don't know if this happens to all women who miss a few pills, because like most of them would be doing the like 1 month, whereas I skip all my periods. So maybe they don't notice it so much. And also we've established that I'm sensitive to chemicals that mess with my brain chemistry, you know, the Claritine incident last year. So yeah, I don't know if this happens to all women, but I definitely noticed I got more aggro. And it's made me wonder things like, does this explain some of my behavior like 10 years ago? Because I went from no pill to taking the pill properly, like with a once a month period, to skipping so I had a period like once every 2 or 3 months, and then to just skipping all my periods. And so over that time, I've sort of gone from probably having a little high levels of testosterone. Like I never got tested for any of this shit. Maybe these days they would do it. But yeah, I probably went from a state of having more testosterone in my system, and maybe that's why, like, when I first came on YouTube, I would have been in that state, and maybe that's why I was more like, this is what I think, guys, and fuck you if you know. But as I've increased and become stable with my sort of female hormone levels, maybe I've chilled out and become a bit more tolerant. And maybe it's not just a early 20s, you know, late teens, early 20s rebellion, finding yourself kind of thing. Maybe it's partly hormones that have chilled me out. But yeah, so I missed 2 days. I did catch up with them, and I managed it a lot better, so I didn't have the same problem I had last time that I messed up my hormones. But I did notice I got a little bit more aggro, and I'm just like, you know what? Fuck everything. I'm not doing, well, at the time I was like, I'm not doing the politics on Facebook. I just can't. I don't want to see it. I'm going to hide posts. I'm going to hide people. I'm just going to like manage my social media so that it makes me less angry. Of course, I realize the testosterone was probably making me angrier than I would have been otherwise. And now I've hopefully chilled. 2 minutes to explain that, or however many minutes to explain that. But yeah, so I was like, yeah, fuck the politics, and I'll just try to get on with my life. I have actually managed to be a little bit more productive in some areas, but then all the premiers started bickering, and all our politicians. And because I am a press conference junkie, I'm seeing all this stuff popping up. I mean, I don't watch every press conference. Mainly the New South Wales ones, but even them, sometimes I miss them because, you know, there's better things to do. But yeah, I happened to be watching, I didn't watch the Queensland one, but I watched the ones after that. I think that was yesterday. I'm just like, ooh boy. And my opinions of politicians around the country. And so 23 minutes in, let's get to the stuff that I don't really want to talk too much about because I don't need arguments. So if people want to get all argumentative in the comments. Hello, Hopi. Hello, give me a moment. All right, I'm sorry about that interruption. Just Hope coming in was a signal to me that my brother was walking around, and I can't film when people are walking around. It's why it's so hard to make videos at the moment, because people are home a lot more than before. So yeah. Anyway, he's gone to bed now. He may get up to, you know, wander around, or I don't know. But we'll try and keep doing this video. So yeah, politics. If you're going to leave a political comment to this video, I might just delete your comment because I don't want to deal with that stuff right now. So yeah, be warned, especially if you're going to put a lot of time and effort into it, probably don't bother. Okay, so political comments from me. First of all, so the thing that has turned everyone against each other, right? Because National Cabinet has been an interesting thing. That's where we get our Prime Minister and our premiers and chief ministers, the leaders of each state. They all get together in a room, and like, you know, we've had attempts at this in Australia before, but COVID is the first time we found a system that, you know, actually seemed to work. So, and, you know, they were actually like, you know, all together. But as time has gone on and things became less urgent, politics has gradually gone back to normal. And this week, things got a little bit crazier. And I can't avoid all the bickering. So, okay, a lot of the no, let me start with what the main issue is that everyone's, getting all up and crazy about. So, in Australia, we have Pfizer and AstraZeneca as the vaccines. AstraZeneca, there's that very, very small chance of blood clotting, smaller chance than me on my pill, probably. Although it is a different type of blood clotting, so, important to know that. In Australia, it's over 60s, it's recommended, but for people under 60, the preferred vaccine is Pfizer, the one that I've gotten. But we have barely any Pfizer and mountains of AstraZeneca because we produce the stuff here, but we can't produce Pfizer here yet. And yeah, our vaccine rollout has gone very slow. This is one of the curses, I think, of having gotten on top of COVID early, is that we've had zero cases for a lot of the time, much less than overseas. So there's a lot less urgency in terms of getting vaccinated because things have felt fairly safe here. People are impatient to open up Australia and travel again, but for the most part, people are thinking it's not that urgent. But with the Delta outbreak, the balance is sort of shifting a little bit. And with AstraZeneca, I don't want to explain everything. Just listen to Norman Swan. And, the ATAGI advice is under 60, Pfizer is preferred, but you can get it AstraZeneca if there's no Pfizer available, if you've talked to your doctor, your GP about the risks and benefits, and you've made an informed consenting decision, standard medical stuff. And the Prime Minister came out and said, look, if you're under 40 and you want to get AstraZeneca, you can talk to your GP and you can have it, as long as you've gone through the risks and you can make your own informed choice. I support that. We should have our own choice to be able to do that sort of thing, but then so that's the thing. And then Queensland have come out with the most irresponsible backlash against it. I mean, the Queensland leaders are taking a bit of flack because a lot of their fuck-ups lately have caused other outbreaks separate to the Sydney outbreak, and it's gone to the Northern Territory, which is one of our most vulnerable states because they've got a lot of Aboriginal people there, and it's a lot of remote locations where it's hard to take vaccines, and they really don't want an outbreak there, and it's come from Queensland. And these things happen, but instead of acknowledging that, Queensland have gotten defensive, and I think they've lashed out a little bit and sort of deflected by sorry, I got something freaking eye. They're just saying, we don't want people under 40 to get it. And even their chief health officer has gone on this thing about, we don't want our young people getting AstraZeneca, and saying she doesn't want an 18-year-old to die of the vaccine when they have a low chance of dying of COVID. But when you actually look at the statistics, an 18-year-old is still more likely to either die or have complications from COVID compared to having the AstraZeneca vaccine. Getting the blood clots is a 3 in 100,000 chance, and then subsequently dying from it. Only a small percentage. Your chance of dying from AstraZeneca is 1 in a million, genuinely. And if Queensland are that scared of an 18-year-old making an informed decision to take a vaccine and take a 1 in a million risk, why are they allowing 18-year-olds to have driver's licenses? Young people driving are very high-risk drivers. And they're adults, when you're 18, you can drive. If you've got your license, you can drink alcohol, you can smoke. There's a lot of things 18-year-olds are allowed to make their own choices about, but you don't want them making their own choice about vaccines. And I realize there are some people who will have issues with the risk. There is a risk with all medications, right? And you don't want to be the person who's prescribed the thing that ultimately resulted in a bad outcome for someone. But, the choice, making an informed choice. And, one of the things with the AstraZeneca debate is like there's not a lot of COVID in Australia, so your risk of COVID is low. Whereas the vaccine risk is just stays the same. Whereas if we had more COVID, maybe that would shift the balance. And then actually, maybe if there's more COVID, maybe the risk, maybe you should take that risk and get it. But the thing is, with young people in particular, they want Australia to open up. They want to go overseas, they want to travel, they want to stay home and go to clubs, they want to travel interstate and not have bookings cancelled last minute because of lockdown. So, young people's priorities are a little bit different. It's not just about death or whatever. It's not just about this small risk that you might get a blood clot. It's like, well, what about my life? They want to go out places. And so it's not just about protecting yourself from COVID. It's about ending this situation and moving Australia forward to a point where we can open up more. And so for young people, if they want to make that choice, why don't you let them? Like, it's not all just about that tiny risk. Blah 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 blah. I don't know if I've articulated the point very well, but that's the thing. So I am not impressed with the Queensland Premier. And Sky News Australia, one of the crazier right-wing outlets, they have sort of crowned her the worst premier in Australia at the moment, and I tend to agree with at least that part of what they're saying. They also say a lot of crazy stuff, like they seem to think we've already vaccinated all our vulnerable people, which is not true. We've done a lot of aged care, but I, as someone involved or close to the disability sector, I know there's a lot of people who are disabled who haven't been vaccinated. There's also a lot of people in the Northern Territory, those vulnerable populations who haven't been vaccinated. There's a long way to go yet. They want to open up when vulnerable people have been vaccinated, but we're not there yet. So, crazy about that. And then they're like, oh, young people aren't going to die. Like the Queensland CHO even said, like admitted that. But it's not just about young people dying. Young people are the ones who will spread it to vulnerable people. So the more people we vaccinate, the better. And then also young people can still get long COVID, which to me is scarier than dying, because when you're dead, that's it. But if you have long COVID, you are constantly suffering. I would rather die than be constantly suffering, but that's me. Anyway, Sky News, not a good source for stuff, but sometimes entertaining. Anyway, so Queensland. I haven't been paying a lot of attention to all the premiers, but the main pattern I've noticed is Labour premiers have tended to be like, what is Scott Morrison doing? He's made a captain's call. We don't like it. Like, we thought we were just giving GPs this indemnity, whatever, legal protection. But then he goes and says this about 40-year-olds. We don't like that. And for the most part, Liberal leaders have been a bit more like, oh, the medical advice is this, follow that, talk to your GP. They've been very balanced. Mainly I'm looking at New South Wales because I'm in New South Wales. They're the ones I care about. I think Gladys and Dr. Chant, they've been very level on it. They've not wanted to get involved in the politics. They've stuck to the medical advice. Although, every now and then there's a subtle swipe at Queensland, which I enjoy. I don't know, Queensland just had this huge tantrum. And I'm like, this is really irresponsible. You are feeding ammo to the anti-vaxxers, you're increasing vaccine hesitancy, it's not helpful, and you're also not respecting people's personal choice. I know that some people will want to say, well, why can't anti-vaxxers have a choice? They do have a choice. They don't have to get the vaccine. No one is forcing anyone, except if you're working with vulnerable people and, in those frontline situations. Otherwise you don't have to get it. But, if someone does want to get it and they understand the risks and they consent and all that kind of stuff, why can't they get AstraZeneca? It's been fine overseas. When we have more Pfizer, yes, everyone get Pfizer or Moderna or whatever it may be. But for now, this is all we've got, and people just want to get on with their lives. Anyway, so in general, Labour seem to have been anti-Scott Morrison, and Liberal seem to be, balanced. Like, I think maybe they're not happy, but they're not going to involve themselves in that drama. But, so Queensland, I don't like their response. New South Wales, I thought was very balanced. I'm happy with that. I don't agree with everything they do, but on this, I think they've managed things well. But my two honourable mentions, Northern Territory. I really like the way that he responded, especially this morning. I think on the ABC they were interviewing him, and they asked him sort of point blank, "Did was this talked about in national cabinet that under 40s would be able to go to their GP?" And he said yes, and they should follow the GP's advice. They can get it if they understand and consent and make their personal choice. And I was like, that's great, because you know what? Northern Territory, what's his name? The Chief Minister, Gunner, I think is his name. He's a Labour guy, and I always like, oh, what a breath of fresh air. And it seems that Dan Andrews, he's back from being unwell. Like, he had a really bad fall, was in hospital, like it seemed to be in a really bad way. Like, made it out of the Victorian crisis only to, yeah, get himself into trouble. So he's back, and he made some very balanced comments as well, and I'm like, yes, because he is Labour as well. Well done, not being all partisan on this. Like, come on. Yeah, and that we like there is that advice. If you want to make that personal choice, go and make it. I think that's very sensible. This is how they should be treating it, instead of Queensland treating their 18-year-olds like babies, and locking down every time someone sneezes. But what do I know? I feel like they're not as confident in their contact tracing and health system, but I think I've already mentioned that. Anyway, yeah, so I like it when politicians, can have a bit of bipartisanship on things that matter like that, instead of this weird deflecting tantrum that Queensland's had, because that it has distracted the media from the failings that they were trying to explore initially. I do think sometimes, like, we are in a really weird time, and so I think sometimes the media is unfair to some of the politicians who have finally had to, like, earn their paychecks working every damn day trying to get on top of this. Like, it's been hard. I don't envy our leaders at all. But, like, I feel like the leaders should own that. Like, look, we're in this situation. And some of the leaders have been like that. Like, look, we're in this situation. We're doing the best we can with the advice we have. And, things slip through the cracks and we don't like that, and then they try and fix it. Sometimes some of the stuff in New South Wales, they've found loopholes a little bit too late. And then, like, the public, like, we thought this was handled. And actually it's not been. So I've not been happy with that in the New South Wales stuff. But they do say, like, look, we're trying to do all these things. Remember, they're also only human. And I feel like Queensland could have been like, look, okay, yes, a thing happened. We're patching those loopholes and move on with it. Instead of, deflecting a tantrum into this and creating this whole other drama. Oh my God, why did you have to? So yeah, that's been annoying me. A few other things that are annoying me. So yeah, just to summarize, I'm happy with what ScoMo has said about Scott Morrison, our Prime Minister. I'm happy with what ScoMo has said about under 40s going to their GPs. Apparently 2,000 have already done it. So, there is demand for this, Queensland, if you're fucking listening, which you're not. I'm happy with New South Wales's response to it. And I'm especially happy with Northern Territory and Victoria, their response to it. Now, another gripe I have, talking about Dan Andrews, right? So, last year there was a lot of animosity directed at him because of the extended lockdown in Victoria, and, I don't know enough about what happened there, but it did seem like there were failings, but he's worked hard to get through that, get the state through it, getting up every day in his what is it, North Face jumper or whatever. Like, he basically had a press conference uniform by the end of it, giving the endless updates, probably in endless meetings, working very hard. But, I know that the decision is unpopular with some groups, and they've called him names and all that. Before Sydney's lockdown, Melbourne actually had another lockdown, and what annoyed me on social media is a lot of people were like, bloody Dan Andrews. The thing is, the poor guy was still recovering from a serious injury, and you're blaming him when he's not even at work? It was some other dude, deputy or whoever's filling in for him. It wasn't Dan Andrews. Cut the guy a fucking break. Blame the people who are actually there. This is something that annoys me about politics, is people just assume they don't even know what the different levels of government do. Like, with the bushfires, right? They're like, oh, ScoMo's on holiday. But he can't do anything unless the states ask him to, because those things presently, things could change, but presently are state issues. They actually legitimately are. And, there's only so much he could do. His main failing with the bushfires was the optics, which he's supposed to be a marketing guy. He's always fucking up optics. And, things with, like, women's issues as well. He's I don't know how he was ever successful with marketing. anyway, anyway. But yeah, no, the Dan Andrews thing, like hating on Dan Andrews when he wasn't even there, he wasn't part of that. Just don't. Oh my god. Another thing, so less related to the politics, right, is other things on social media that are annoying me. People who talk about censorship. Oh, Facebook is censoring us, they're not letting you hear the truth, and blah, 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 blah. No, 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 censorship, right? The thing is, they've been able to post that opinion. Some of them even write, oh, I bet they're not even going to let me say this, right? And then you can see conversations. Clearly, people can see your post. Are you being censored? Are they such dictators that but also dumb that they just let your post slip through? If we lived in a true censorship dictatorship, that would be down so fast. Probably your whole profile would be down so fast. I know some people get hit for things and they're like, oh, I'm in Facebook jail, but often they have violated the terms. Sometimes things go down for weird reasons, but it's hard to get a clear story because some people have weird ideas about what should be allowed. But hey, Facebook's a private company, they can do what they want. But when it comes to I don't know, I just find it a weird contradiction when people are like, oh, I'm being censored, and yet there's their opinion. On a related note, some people, they'd make comments about COVID and then they get that little notice at the bottom that says, oh, here's some advice from the WHO or whatever it says. And they're like, oh, look at this, I'm not allowed to express an opinion without them tacking this on, they're trying to control me and blah, blah, blah. The thing is, obviously it's an automatic algorithm. Have they not noticed that official trustworthy government sources also come up with that notice quite frequently? It's just a blanket thing they put on everything. It has been a bit frustrating sometimes because I've tried to look up articles about a specific COVID issue in Australia, and instead I keep getting all these CDC, like American stuff. I don't need to know about American COVID. My God, Facebook, get over yourself. But, I understand why they've done it because there's so many people who are coming up with such crazy conspiracy theories. But yeah, no, it's just funny. These people are like, oh, I'm being targeted for my views on COVID. And they don't notice that official government sources that they hate are also getting this notice. There's just weird logic out there, and it's been annoying me. And so now I've finally had the rant, and now I can fucking go to bed and get on with my life, right? I don't. I've sort of gotten tired of politics in a big way, and I tend to keep my opinions increasingly to myself, although occasionally I slip up. But yeah, I just needed to go on a rant because it's been annoying me watching the news, and some of the reporting has been dishonest and unhelpful, and they cherry pick things and they spin things, especially the commercial stations, but even the ABC has done it a little bit, and the 7:30 show, oh, so much bias in that, and that's even the ABC. Sometimes the agendas are really clear, but yeah, Channel 7 and all that, you can see they're pretending to be helpful, but they're getting off on the drama, really, because that's how they make their money, right? Drama sells, and so, any little thing. There are some things that legitimately need to be criticised so that we improve, but then sometimes they've just been unhelpful and made problems worse, and there's no solution to this. No one cares about my opinion anyway. Who am I? Some random on the internet. I'm no one important, and I don't plan to be anyone important because that's just not my game. But yeah, it's annoyed me, and there's only so much I can keep to myself before I just have to go on a late night rant, and yeah, managed to get through all that without being interrupted again, and this has turned into a really long video. I'm sorry, but I just had a lot to say, and I hope it wasn't too confusing. And yeah, I definitely recommend Corona Cast, Dr. Norman Swan, and Tegan Taylor, who's a health reporter or something. I don't know, I like Dr. Norman Swan. I think I like his accent. Maybe I'm a bit biased because of his accent. But yeah, sometimes he errs on the side of paranoia in some COVID issues, but for the most part, I think he's very straight talking on it. He's got a lot of the latest information. He's got some interesting insights, and yeah. So I listen. He appears on 7:30 sometimes, and I don't like that that show overall, but I think the information he presents is well done and yeah, medically sound, and he keeps up to date with things, and he's not afraid to criticize the government when it's warranted, and you know, will also praise things that he thinks needs to be done too. So I feel like there's balance there. And yeah, watching the press conferences real time, probably don't need to do that, but it is interesting, and you do get it without the media, you know, editing and the sound bites. So yeah, that's I can't help it, and it takes me away from the social media. I mean, it takes me away from the computer for a bit. So you know, and then yeah, ABC 24. Oh, what's his name? Casey Briggs, their COVID analyst. Wow, it's funny how like things pop up in your brain after a while. Yeah, some of his graphs are interesting, and he made an interesting point, I think even today, which was about, you know, with the AstraZeneca, it's very much a risk benefit balance, and when COVID is low, the risk benefit balance isn't so good for AstraZeneca, but when COVID is high, the balance is better. Now, COVID is low because we've kept our borders shut and had very strict things, you know, provisions and restrictions and whatever, right? But if we want to open up, that's going to raise the cases, and so it's that catch-22 of, well, our current situation, AstraZeneca, it's still okay. Like the numbers are still in favor of taking AstraZeneca, but not as much as if we had more COVID. But we don't get there until we open up. But we can't open up until everyone's been vaccinated. And like, you know, but if no one's vaccinated, we can't open up. But dude, it's confusing. Does it? Yeah. Anyway, so that's my attempt at getting all my thoughts out at once. Word vomit, maybe not explained well, maybe very Australia-centric, for anyone overseas who might not understand stuff. And then also I watch a lot of this stuff, so I don't know what other people don't know. I'm sorry if that's you, if you're like, where is all this information coming from? That's all I've got. I'm going to bed. Good night.